Hello, I'm Ryan Cook, and this is Civic Tech Chat, a show that looks at the way technology, politics, and policy impacts the world around us, the tools we use, the way services are delivered, and how we talk about and set policy all shape our society. We'll gather around and have a chat about these things together and more. This will be a sort of special episode that we're about to hop into. I'm grateful for the fact that Nava PBC has partnered with us to do a sponsored episode. So I'm excited both for the partnership and for the very interesting conversation we'll have ahead about their innovative work and research. Martelle, Genevieve, thank you both for coming on to Civic Tech Chat. Could you introduce yourselves and tell us all a bit about what you do?
Yeah, I can start. My name is Genevieve Gaudet. I'm director of Nava Labs at Nava Public Benefit Corporation, and started and co-lead the lab with Martelle. And in general, the lab is a philanthropically funded research and innovation arm where we prototype policy and systems changes and then advocate for their adoption into government services.
And I'm Martelle Esposito, and I'm the Partnerships and Evaluation Manager and co-founder and co-lead of Nava Labs at Nava Public Benefit Corporation with Genevieve, as she shared. And I think what's really cool about our work together is that we bring together technology delivery and advocacy and communications expertise to create a really great innovation team.
And for each of you, what would you say is your personal why? That thing that drives you to get out of bed each morning and do all those things?
My why is it doesn't have to be this way. The technology exists to make it easy for people to get the benefits that they are eligible for. And we just need to be working on implementing that technology effectively. But it doesn't have to be this way. So I know I can play a role in helping make the change. And so that's my why.
I feel like that phrase, you're like, you have a ready-made thing for one of those laptop stickers at one of the conferences, like, doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, mine is very similar that technology, in the right hands and with the right design can empower people, and I think especially in public services can empower people to get the things they need for themselves and for their families and enable them to have, sort of all of the choices and options and the autonomy to live a full and dignified and comfortable life. So that feels like, yeah, if we can do that even a little bit, that would be totally enough.
So I think we can go ahead and hop into our main topic today, which we're here to cover Nava Labs. So I'm going to ask you a fun compound question about that, which is, well, what is Nava Labs? What are you trying to accomplish? And why is it valuable?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think to really explain what Nava Labs is, it's important to start with, well, what is Nava, the organization that we sit within? So Nava Public Benefit Corporation is a consultancy that helps government agencies make their digital services more usable, more effective, more efficient. And Nava Labs, which is a newer branch within the company that Martelle and I started, really focuses on incubating new scalable products, practices, and policy ideas, and building the evidence and partnerships that we need to do those projects and advocate for those changes. So within the lab, we're really able to bring together the things that Nava is excellent at, like service design, human-centered design, and agile development, with some of the research and advocacy specialties all together on one team. And when we kind of zoom way out from just the products and the projects that we're working on in the lab, we're able to look at what kinds of different levers might need to be pushed to realize something very, very different in that space. So is it a policy change that might need to happen? Do we need to be advocating for a different kind of strategy, at the federal level or at the state level?
And ultimately, what we're trying to do is close the participation gap for programs. So we know that there are currently $228 billion in public benefits that go unclaimed annually. And so by understanding which products, which practices, which policy ideas can help close that implementation gap in the context of the lab, we can then advocate for those products, practices, and policies in the broader program areas that we work in, which can range from programs like WIC and SNAP, Medicaid, TANF, and many more.
And I gotta make sure I heard you right. That was 220 billion with a B that you mentioned,
Yes,
right?
yes, billion with a
Wow.
B.
That is a massive amount of money to kind of have out there not kind of doing its intended purpose. I mean, that's more than the GDP of some nations out there in the world. And for that to be unclaimed annually is interesting. But what's the human story behind a massive number like that? And how does AI work kind of change that reality?
The Urban Institute was actually the place that did the sort of had this finding in some of their research about the participation gap in major programs like Medicaid, different tax credits for folks who are below certain income thresholds, SNAP, TANF programs like that. And when we begin to put that sort of in the context of what people experience, that is millions of millions of families going without the food budget for the month that could really help them feed their families. That is missed doctor's appointments, that is conditions that go from acute to much more chronic because folks are not able to get the health care that they need. That is, millions of dollars in tax refunds that don't make their way to families with young children who could put that, into childcare, into education, into any number of things. And there are a lot of reasons why that happens. And Martelle, I think I'll pass it over to you to talk about some of the
Yeah.
challenges that people have when they try to access those programs.
Yeah, so the why behind the number is that it's really hard to participate in many public benefit programs. You have to apply, you have to verify data. Sometimes you have to go in for an interview. Sometimes they're collecting health data. There are a range of steps that, on the surface maybe don't seem that difficult, but when you get into the details, oh, do you have this particular document that showcases this particular piece of information during this particular time period? It can be quite challenging. And then also to even just navigate and understand which programs that you're eligible for can be difficult. And many organizations actually have staff who help people understand and help them navigate the programs that they might be eligible and help them enroll in those programs. We've called these staff collectively benefits navigators, but these might be call center staff, outreach specialists, sometimes community health workers play this role. So yeah, there is a whole story behind the number. There's a reason why there are so many unclaimed benefits, but we're trying to change that with some of our AI work. How might we leverage AI tools to help reduce some of the burdens that both the beneficiaries and staff face when helping families navigate and enroll in benefit programs, including a chatbot?
Yeah, and I think it's like really easy for folks to hear about a number like that and like lose sense for what it actually means because it's not even really about just like one person missing a benefit. There's like a ripple effect. If it's someone in a family or someone in a community, these things happen and affect your neighborhood, right? And the folks around you. Happy to hear that y'all are thinking about the human impact of these things along with the challenge of how to get that allocated properly. I also find your use of the word navigator is interesting based on kind of how you're describing the process. I'm kind of curious though, as like those navigators are kind of in a real caseworker setting, which I believe I heard that your chatbot is now being piloted in such a place. Can you walk us through like what's a day like for one of those navigators that's kind of working with this?
Oh man, it could be very highly variable. Some navigators specialize in very specific instances or very specific parts of that navigation enrollment experience. So some navigators, like call center specialists, might be helping someone troubleshoot their application, while others might be more like a caseworker, where they're working with a family to understand the family's needs. Um, Learn about what's difficult for them, what they could use help with, and then kind of help match them with programs that they can sign up for and enroll in and get the help that they need. In the context of our chatbot project, we have been working with a nonprofit organization in LA County called Imagine LA. They have an existing benefit navigator tool, which is a little confusing because it's also called Navigator. It is a software tool that is a screener that caseworkers use to help people understand what benefits that they might be eligible for. And so we've been working to add a layer of AI on top of that to make it easier, make that navigation easier for caseworkers. So essentially, before they might be going through and searching Google or searching internal databases or doing a lot of information retrieval that takes a little bit more time, a little bit more of their own discernment, their own navigation to find information about different programs for the families that they serve. With the chatbot, the goal was let's make this really easy. Generative AI is really good at retrieving information. It's one of the strengths of the technology at the moment. So let's leverage that and make it really easy to pull information and resources from credible sources with citations, just like they would do if they were doing it on their own, but do it instantly instead of them having to go and search a bunch of different sources. That's a general look at the before and after of the tool. We've currently just wrapped up our pilot, so we'll have more details about the before and after and the experience that the caseworkers had using the tool.
And
Yeah.
I think I heard you describe a like retrieval augmented generation style chatbot. Am I hearing that accurately? Is that kind of what y'all
Yes.
strove to build?
That's right. So the chatbot that we were piloting is grounded in kind of sources of truth that range from publicly available government websites that, the kind of have the rules and policies that caseworkers need to have in mind, in addition to the sort of internal knowledge management tools that Imagine LA uses to kind of help navigators in their work to get people into programs. So uh, it is trying to mitigate against some of those risks around hallucinations. We don't want a tool making up a program or anything like that, but we do want it to do the thing that computers are really good at, which is like search a bunch of files, find the appropriate citation, get that information into the hands of the navigator so that they can continue, the conversation that they're having with their client at that time. And I think that within that, there's a really important kind of insight that spawned this project around just how hard it is to be a navigator, to be a frontline worker for a government program. Before the lab even existed, this was work that Nava and folks at Nava were doing to make government services significantly better for the people who use them, but also the people who have to kind of manage them and administer them on those front lines. And so coming into the project, Martelle and I were really focused on how can we really lower the burden that's on navigators and that administrative and operational burden of managing these programs. And by doing so, hopefully create more longevity in that role. It's a high turnover, high burnout kind of job, and really create more opportunities for human connection within that public services delivery.
Yeah, and I think a dream of ours is that ultimately this can help remove the barrier to entry for some of this work so that you could go to your local library and your librarian or your volunteers can use tools like these to help families navigate and enroll in benefits. And then the highly skilled and highly trained caseworkers can focus on that more one-on-one in-person time to assess and understand more detailed needs and supports that a family might need.
Genevieve, it was interesting to hear you mention maybe the challenge of avoiding hallucinations, having guardrails, making sure the app doesn't just like legislate its own program for how things work. Because in my experience, kind of doing like tr retrieval augmented generation, the easy part is just getting a pipeline that does something. The hard part is like getting it to be accurate, to like reliably give you citations, kind of to well not hallucinate so much. Is that a challenge y'all ran into and kind of along the way there?
In early prototyping, yes, we saw things like that come up. What our team was able to do was give the tool a lot of instruction about what it doesn't know. So, for example, we were piloting in LA County and we kind of built in guardrails around if you ask about SNAP in Arizona. So this is like, help buying food outside of the jurisdiction of where those caseworkers are operating. And the chatbot will say, I actually can't answer that question, but you might want to go look at the Arizona SNAP, official website, and it can show you that. So getting really clear on, here's your role as a chatbot, here's what you're supposed to do, and here's what you actually can't answer questions about, we found was really critical to kind of mitigating that risk that it was going to just like be asked a question it didn't know about and do what large language models do, which is guess. We actually wanted to reduce the guessing as much as possible.
We also made a point to experiment with direct quotations. So the tool outputs a plain language response and then links to a direct source so that caseworkers can actually just go to the direct source, which is what they would have probably done without the tool and with more effort before the tool. It's something that we've gotten some early signal has been really valuable to be able to see that direct source. Like, oh, this comes from this particular policy manual. That makes a lot of sense that's where that's coming from.
Oh, and you also mentioned that you try to have it give a plain language response. Is that something y'all had to like spend time fine-tuning it, I guess, right in that style for folks, or what was that process like?
I actually don't think we had to do much proper fine-tuning there. The team instead built in some kind of monitoring around reading level. So just going back to that Flash Kincaid reading score, which if folks are doing reading level assessments will know that has been around for a really long time. That's not like an AI. You don't need an AI tool to do that at all. But no, we found that given the right instructions around readability and reading level, large language models are pretty good at reducing things to plain language. And we found so far initial indications, we haven't finished our evaluations yet, but it seemed like even in other commonly spoken languages, that was also true.
And one of the things that we're doing with this particular chatbot pilot is quite an intense study of accuracy. We're working with the Georgetown Better Government Lab. They have a National Science Foundation grant to study accuracy, administrative burden, and bias in AI tools applied to public benefits contexts. And we're very fortunate to be their first partner on this work. And so we've been pleasantly surprised by that study so far. We'll be able to share results shortly, but this is something that we have been focusing on because we know it is of interest for government agencies. We don't want to be giving incorrect information and hallucinations, making things up, that kind of thing. So we'll have hard data on that soon as well, which is exciting.
In Martel's answer before, I believe you brought up the term burden as something y'all have a goal to reduce for folks that are involved in this process, which really brought my brain to the phrase administrative burden, which is a thing that's referenced a bunch in your written materials about this work. For folks that are maybe not familiar with the phrase or the concept, what is it and why is it an important thing to work on?
So administrative burden is a concept developed by the Better Government Lab about the burden of engaging with government applications and processes. This can be paperwork, the information you have to understand, the information that you need to understand to move forward in a process, the documents that you have to gather and share, all of the different steps in applying and engaging with government programs. And this takes time and mental effort and can be a barrier to participating in programs. So it impacts that coverage gap that we talked about, that $228 billion in unclaimed benefits. And so for us, administrative burden is really important to study and look at as part of our work, because we want to target tools, technology tools, interventions that ultimately reduce burden. We want to be able to measure that it's reduced burden, and we want to be able to show that that burden reduction has actually resulted in increased participation in programs. So if we think about your experience with government, if it's a good experience, if it's an easy experience, you're more likely to participate and get those benefits. If it's a burdensome experience, you're less likely to. And so we're trying to go from a burdensome experience to a non-burdensome experience. And that's something that we can measure in the context of our project.
Something that we're going to continue to talk about, I think that relates to what you're describing there, trying to take action, is the idea of kind of using experimentation to kind of test ideas and kind of see what you can do about these problems. I believe in a lot of your writing, you use the phrase early experimentation, and you're kind of referring to things like prototyping, which we've been talking about here, piloting, and eventually trying to take that and scaling it to a broader problem. But we start at that beginning place, that early experimentation. Why is it important to engage in that for programmatic work?
Folks who are listening who work on, software development, technology tools, this is a really established kind of practice, especially in agile methodologies, where we're kind of working in a loop, right? We're trying things out, we're measuring them, and kind of iterating from there. And in the context of the lab, we're applying that really so that we can fail early. Right. We can fail without investing a lot of our team's time or a lot of our partners' money into understanding what works. And when we're thinking about emerging technologies like AI, we want to get to some of those initial signals on our hypotheses as quickly as possible. So, for example, in the context of the chatbot, well, some of our early questions and experiments were around, will caseworkers use this? Is this, sort of an appropriate way to reduce their workload? Can the models actually support some of the questions that we know folks would need to answer? And by creating, a container in the lab where we can fail, it's safe, and we can iterate from there. It enables our teams to move faster. It gives us a stronger point of view on what actually is going to work, and it allows us to share back really quickly with the field. Here's the experiments that we did. Here's what we learned. You don't have to do them yourself. You can build on all of what we've learned, and use those to improve the programs that or services that you're working on.
It sounds a bit like you're describing kind of like a change slash risk management kind of principle where it's like maybe your agency or org wants to make a bet on something. So instead of doing it all at once, you test it like a small scale. So you kind of validate the idea before you put the big investment in. Am I kind of hearing that correctly?
Yeah, that's right. And that was a big, kind of impetus for us to create the lab in the first place. I think it's important to keep in mind the context of the broader Nava team, where we've got folks working on mission critical systems at the federal level, at the state level, in some cases at the local level. And all of those, projects are, it's high risk to be doing experimentation in that context, right?
It doesn't mean we're not iterating and testing, but we may not be taking as high of risks as Genevieve was saying.
Right. Working with a totally different strategy or a new technology or something like that. We really needed a space where that could be done responsibly, in a way that kind of stewards goals around public benefit and public money, which the lab is philanthropically funded, so we don't use government funds for those experiments. In order to do that responsibly, but sort of have some momentum of innovation, we really needed a different space where we could be kind of taking all of those insights that we were getting about like what it's like to deliver a service as a benefit navigator, and identify opportunities to experiment with other ways to make those things a lot easier.
in the lab, we are focused first on learning and second on building software. And I think in most other government contexts, the first goal is to build working software. So we have the privilege of being able to essentially fail for the purposes of learning so that we can share that out and we can other people can learn from our experiences.
As we talk about these methods for learning and risk management, it makes me think of the materials I saw that Nava Labs have, talking about a multi-phased approach for evaluating the use of ethical AI tools. You mentioned user research, early experimentation, which we've been talking about a bit, prototyping, piloting, and eventually scaling. If we start talking about user research and early experimentation first, it sounds like you're trying to get evidence together through quick actions rather than trying to set up like large, long experiments. Why is that kind of approach crucial when we talk about things like policy change? Have you ever kind of come across surprises as you've kind of gone about those phases with your work?
Yeah, I think in the early experimentation, we were able to get signals about what uses of AI are appropriate and what uses of AI are acceptable to our end users. And then from there, finding that right problem solution fit. So identifying the problems within the caseworker experience, within that benefit navigator experience, and where generative AI actually is strong and can solve those problems. So matchmaking that coupled with understanding interest and concerns and or excitement from prospective beneficiaries and caseworkers and benefit navigators about using AI was extremely helpful for how we then thought about which tools we wanted to take further and which tools could potentially have the most impact. So there's both an element of feasibility, so understanding, is this feasibly going to be accepted and going to also potentially have impact and be the appropriate solution to the problem. I don't know, Genevieve, if you have some other thoughts here.
Yeah, just to ground it a little bit more, I'll share that we did not set out to build a chatbot. We set out with our funders at the Gates Foundation, who really jump-started this work for us to figure out if there were any responsible ethical applications of generative AI in helping benefit navigators connect people to programs. That broad of a question. So that early experimentation really was a combo of user research, but also our team just looking at the time, and I say at the time because these tools change like every couple of weeks at this point, at the time, what could large language models actually do? So, for example, we were looking at, given a bunch of documents like policy rules and things like that, could it reliably grab and cite back answers to policy questions? Answers to questions like if my client is a part-time student and lives at home with their parents, are they eligible for food assistance? And more complicated questions like that.
In that early experimentation, the answer was no. We were getting a lot of incorrect answers back from the general LLMs, which then prompted us to pursue additional guardrails within our tool.
Yeah. But we also looked at other use cases around when you apply for a benefit program, particularly one where you are getting money from the government, you have to provide a lot of documents around who you are and how much money you have and whether you have any assets and in the shape of your household, the structure of your household, I mean. And so we were also doing things like, out of the box, can any of these frontier models kind of take a bunch of documents and then tell us what the documents say and prove about the person? And we had a really funny case where we were calling it the document analyzer. where we were trying to get the document analyzer to tell us whether or not something was a photo ID of a person. And so we had like a mock driver's license. We had the same mock driver's license, really blurry. And then we had like a piece of notebook paper where someone had written, "This is a photo ID." Right. And two of those counted, and it wasn't the two, there shouldn't have been two of those things that really counted for that kind of use case. And so really looking at like what are the limits of the technology? So experimenting in that case, doing concept testing with the navigators that we're working with to understand like what is the appropriateness to the task at hand. Would they want to use a tool for this? How do they feel about it? Does it make sense to fit into their workflow? So, experimentation kind of in all of those domains while we're looking for whether there was any ripe opportunity to pilot something, and the chatbot kind of emerged at the forefront of those tools. And we're gearing up to pilot another one of them.
Also say it emerged because our partners also were really interested in the chatbot at the time. So we were actually very open and excited to explore a range of tools, but this was a particular tool that they could see extra value for them that they wanted to pursue. So part of it was also what was our particular nonprofit partners' interest and needs as well.
So it sounds like kind of this process led you to this solution idea, which then sounds like it passed through that kind of feasibility filter y'all were describing, which then led it into, hey, like
We
let's do
actually
some
have an
prototyping.
appropriateness checklist.
Oh, an
We have an
appropriateness
appropriateness
checklist.
checklist for anyone that wants to follow essentially our feasibility assessment
Yeah,
for,
maybe we can put it in the
yeah,
show notes for
yeah.
this.
Oh, nice. Okay. We're not listeners. I'll make sure we get that linked in there. So you'll be able to click on it and see what they're talking about. But since it sounds like it got enough checks on the
Mhm.
checklist to kind of go to your next phase, which is kind of getting into a prototype and into a pilot. What did you all learn kind of through the process with this chatbot project, going through prototyping and piloting?
So our core partner in that pilot, Martelle mentioned them earlier. They're Imagine LA, and they have a software product called the Benefit Navigator that folks at different nonprofits across LA County use in their work as professional navigators, right? So the Benefit Navigator as a software product can help you do the intake for a client and understand kind of what is the plan, what do we think they're probably eligible for, and then can kind of lead you off into those different applications. And so for us, moving into that pilot phase, before we were able to pilot, we needed to understand, well, where should this chatbot show up in the experience for a navigator? In our case, we actually made our chatbot available via API so that navigators weren't having to like add another tool to their already, kind of burdened workflow like we talked about. So making sure that there was the right kind of context in terms of the workflow for the chatbot to show up in, doing early testing to make sure that it was just working generally, and that they were prepared to kind of do that integration, making sure that we recruited the benefit navigators who ended up being from actually 5 different organizations in LA County. I think at final count we had 60 navigators who used the chatbot during the pilot, and making sure that they were ready and trained and able to really use it once we went live with the pilot.
So related to the training, we were like, okay, we're gonna train everyone. They're gonna use it. It's gonna be great. Adoption wasn't as high as we were hoping when we first started. So I think that was an interesting early lesson for us of we need to invest not only in training but also in additional touch points to understand what are the barriers and challenges for people. Why are they not using the chatbot? And so our team did some sessions with some of the navigators to understand why they weren't, why they maybe weren't using it as frequently as we were hoping that they would. And we're able to share additional information and answer many questions. And after that, we ended up getting more adoption. So I think that was a key lesson learned and a big value of testing this in actual world setting is you don't actually know how people will use it until it is in the real world. You won't understand why they're using it or why they're not using it until you talk to them. And yeah, that was a really interesting aspect of the pilot. In addition to some early anecdotes of navigator experiences. We've gotten some pretty positive feedback so far, and we've seen the usage increase over time, which was really, really exciting. And we will be reporting on the full pilot results very soon.
We've been talking about the context of AI tools in the navigator sense, like folks that are helping others out as they engage with a service. But as we were preparing, y'all also mentioned to me that you have work on kind of another side of it, which is like the folks that are filling out the applications themselves, where you have a pilot for an agentic AI that can autonomously fill out benefit applications. What does something like that mean for the future of government service and how folks interact with it?
I
Yeah,
think it's very exciting.
it is. Yeah, I'll give a little context to that. So, it's really exciting. We are expanding our AI tools for caseworkers program with a grant from Google.org, which we will be kind of in partnership with Imagine LA again and Riverside County, which is a county in Southern California next to Los Angeles County. So I'm based in Los Angeles. This is all very close to me and the community that I'm in. But for this pilot, we are still caseworker facing for this pilot and for this experimentation. But we are looking at, once someone has gone through that intake process with their caseworker, once they've identified what they're eligible for, can we use information that already exists, either in the benefit navigator system or the case notes or the conversation between those folks to begin filling out those applications for people. And this targets, another part of what we talked about earlier in terms of what is really burdensome in terms of getting into these programs. So if you can imagine, if you are eligible for CalFresh, which is the California version of SNAP, so food assistance, you have to provide, documentation of your income, who you are, your household, kind of all those things we discussed earlier. But let's say you're also eligible for cash assistance or another program, maybe childcare because you have young children in your household, you will provide that same information over and over again across these different applications. And so this project is really looking at how can we dramatically reduce the time and effort that is spent on paperwork and, increase some of that program efficiency while looking at the potential for these more emerging kind of AI paradigms around agents to begin to kind of shift the way that service gets delivered.
I think has the potential to completely transform how government serves people. We were at the kickoff for this particular grant opportunity last week, and I know Genevieve and I were talking about how this could completely disrupt how digital applications flow as we know it. The digital flows could become a thing of the past. So imagine a future where a caseworker and a client are just having a conversation and the AI agent is working in the background to populate the appropriate information into application forms. And so you're having this very human to human interaction instead of focusing on extracting data for the purposes of just filling out a form. The data is coming up in the context of a conversation. And then, we of course will promote caseworker oversight to review the applications. We wouldn't want just information being sent without consent or without oversight. But it has the ability to allow the caseworker to focus on the humanity of the interaction rather than the bureaucracy of the interaction, which is really exciting.
So we've been talking about some fun and interesting projects here, which for some reason it makes me think of this quote that I can't remember where it comes from, but I'll attempt to paraphrase it, where it's the difference between playing or messing around in science is writing down the results. So as we think about that in this context, I imagine you're collecting a bunch of data, maybe kind of figuring out criteria to evaluate these experiments we've been talking about, these pilots, these prototypes. What does that look like in the context of this sort of work?
Yeah, so we're collecting a lot of data. As I said, our goal is to learn and share out what we're learning for purposes of policy change, for purposes of scaling ideas, practices, products. So we're collecting a lot of data to share, both qualitative and quantitative. And we are looking at several different areas of several different outcome areas, some of which we've already shared. So we're looking at that appropriateness of the problem solution fit for the AI and the problem. We're looking at the acceptability of the tools by both the benefits navigators, the caseworkers, and the beneficiaries, the families. We're looking at accuracy. That's a really interesting one. I'll get back to that in a moment. We're looking at administrative burden, and we're looking at bias, so that we're not inadvertently providing good service to one population and bad service to another population. We want to know where our weaknesses are so that we can correct for that in the broader service experience. But going back to accuracy, I do want to highlight that this one is a really important one for us because I feel like it's often misunderstood in the AI context. We're often like, oh, we need really, really accurate AI models. And yes, that's true. But really, what we need is accurate results. Like we need accurate enrollments. We need accurate referrals. And humans aren't 100% accurate. The AI models may not be 100% accurate. But maybe together they're going to be more accurate. And that's what we're trying to test is the human that engages with the AI tool. Can we get to better outcomes? Can we get to more people enrolled? Can we close that coverage gap?
I think when we talk about either whether it's like new tools, new processes, new ways of working, I think we inevitably run into the question of, especially if you've just determined that they're working at the scale we're talking about, and you want to make it bigger, right? I think you inevitably hit the thing where it's like, well, you got to convince other people to be down to implement it, right? So you have to get like buy-in from stakeholders, which I guess is maybe the like more businessy way to say it. What promising kinds of practices have y'all found so far for trying to get that buy-in from folks?
We are really focused on doing all of our work in the open. I know it's a general civic tech practice to do work in the open, but everything of ours is open. Open source code, open practices, open processes, open results sharing. And we see our value in Nava Labs to these broader advocacy conversations for programs is in sharing our learnings. And we are technology researchers and implementers. And so we are not, we're not the lobbyists, but we have a lot of valuable information that could be contributed to these broader conversations to decision makers and influencers of decision makers. They should have the information they need to make better decisions. So what we've been doing is we've been intentional about sharing what we've learned with organizations who have relationships with program administrators and policymakers. We've hosted public demo days and invited decision makers and influencers. We've taken meetings with government agencies and partners who want to learn more. We are contributing to requests for comment, requests for information on AI topics. And we've also created a lot of resources and tools with our communications team. Nava has a wonderful communications team. Shout out to the comms team. We've created a specific web page that houses all of our process so far. So you can join our journey from research to experimentation to prototyping to piloting. We have it all documented in case studies. We have toolkits like the appropriateness toolkit we mentioned. We host events like the demo days. But yeah, we're continuously learning things that we think could be valuable to broader conversations around AI implementation in government programs that policymakers, program implementation decision makers could find valuable.
Something I've seen even in my own work when it comes with like you're measuring things and coming up with metrics, that sort of things, particularly ones that lead to decision making, is that a problem can come up, especially if you have some sort of reward attached to the outcome of a metric, and that the metric itself becomes like the goal. And when that happens, it can lead to some like unintended incentives and unintended consequences. How can you seek to avoid a situation like that?
Yeah, this makes me think about the accuracy measure that I talked about a little bit earlier. I think there can be overemphasis on model accuracy and not enough emphasis on outcomes. What are the outcomes we're trying to achieve, the accuracy of those outcomes? So I could see us getting, if we're emphasizing model accuracy, that's great. But if we're not actually measuring impact on outcomes, we could have a great model and actually not have great impact on that coverage gap that we're trying to achieve. So that's one example that comes to mind. And my advice is to my advice to folks thinking about when you're thinking about what to measure, think think not just about the product metrics, so not just the model accuracy. Think about the program outcomes you want to achieve and try to see where the linkage between the product metrics that you can measure and the program outcomes and see if you can measure using program data as well. So that would be my recommendation is like, don't necessarily just go all in on product metrics, because if we're not looking at program outcomes, it might not actually be doing any good.
Let's take a moment and step back from, I guess, numbers and data, and let's think about like success, which leads to a question I have, which is, what does success look like for a family that benefits from your work beyond the kind of data and numbers stuff we've been talking about?
To me, I think that success really looks like just access to the benefits they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. Right. And so kind of going back to where we started, that translates into kind of no friction around buying the food you need for your family that week or that month, easy access to healthcare when you need it, or even for preventative services. And over time, we really see those benefits compound into people having more options, people having more room to kind of make the decisions that work for them and their families in terms of education, the kind of jobs they want to go after, wealth building, things like that. And it's been shown that as those things compound, people live longer. They have healthier, kind of outcomes. They have better socioeconomic outcomes. And I think that we're just a tiny piece of that in like making this one part of the safety net stronger. But I think the potential is really great for helping connect families to those benefits. And then I think within that, one of the things that this project is looking at is what is the paradigm shift that can, or will come about as a result of introducing more AI enabled tools into government services, and how can we kind of influence that to be a good thing, to have a positive impact on American families who are trying to connect with programs that are going to help them. How can we make sure that we kind of steward these technologies in a responsible and ethical way toward those goals?
And as we get to, I think, the cap of our main topic before we get into the kind of closing sort of questions, there's a fun magic wand kind of thing for us to cover first, which is, if you could wave a magic wand and change one policy tomorrow, what would it be and why?
I think that we should establish more experimentation labs within the context of government agencies to allow people to experiment with emerging technologies like AI, but also just other technologies, have a place where people can take risks and do experiments and pilots and prototypes and not have such pressure, delivery pressure that is usually accompanied by technology work in government. There is precedent for this. We do a lot of piloting work on all sorts of interventions and programs across government, so it's not like this is a new thing, but I think technology specific experimentation labs would be awesome.
Yeah, I think for me, I am also realizing I think this might be the same answer I gave you when I did the podcast in like 2018 2018 or 2019. But more room to fail, ever more room to fail. I think that's sort of the biggest value of the lab to my mind is that we have the space to do these experiments, to really set some bold, ambitious goals and just like run at them. I think that government services and the safety net are like some of the most tangible ways we kind of make good on our promises to each other. And like, why wouldn't we try some really bold, ambitious ways of carrying that off? So I would love to see more more safe, contained failure within the space.
Well, I might have to go back into the archive and see how consistent that answer is now.
I think it might be the same answer.
It sounds familiar. I think you might be right. Yeah. It's a good answer, though.
Thanks.
And as we get kind of to our closing section, I imagine there's folks out there listening, maybe discovering Nava for the first time as they kind of come through here. Maybe they're interested in the work y'all are doing. Is there anything you'd like to share with them about the work y'all have coming up?
Yes. So I think there's a few plugs I would love to make. We are always hiring at Nava for technologists, so designers, engineers, product managers, project managers, etc. You can check that out at navapbc.com. We also are sharing very frequently what is going on in the lab. As Martelle said, we are publishing our pilot results soon, and we're also kicking off two exciting additional pilots, one of them being the agentic submissions tool with Imagine LA in Riverside County. So folks can follow along with that at the Nava Labs section of the Nava PBC website. We have lots of demo days and love to engage with folks. So if you're interested in following along with what we're doing, or you just want to get in touch, please go to the website, sign up for our newsletters. You can even sign up for a lab specific one if you just want to keep up with what we're doing there. Am I missing anything?
You can subscribe to our newsletter. We just started a newsletter too. So we can share the link in.
Oh yeah, can we put that?
Can we put that
out?
somewhere?
Yeah, I can. We will make sure that these links are in the show notes because I'm hearing somewhere that there's a newsletter folks can subscribe to, so we can make sure it's there and ready for them.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you
Great.
can hear from Martelle and I every other week about the lab and what's going on.
Awesome. Well, Martelle, Genevieve, thank you both for coming on to Civic Tech Chat. I have no doubt that with what we covered today, that folks will have some interesting tidbits they can bring into their day or into their work. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. I'll do one last plug. We're always looking for more partners in the lab. So get in touch with us. We would love to figure out if there's a pilot or experiment or project we can do together. So let us know.
Visit us on the web at civictech.chat or subscribe to us for content updates wherever it is you download your podcasts.